Hi there. Thanks for joining me here on Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, the founder of Bare Bones Yoga and the creator of the Momentum Magic Method, the way to become a confident teacher, one who effortlessly walks around the room, shares clear cues, easily builds sequences, and speaks from your heart, sharing authentically with your students. Here on the podcast, you'll discover new and inspiring ways to share your cues and create your sequences. You'll uncover habits and frameworks all designed to empower you so that you can teach in a way that feels authentic and natural. For some episodes, I'll have a guest, and other episodes I'll share with you on my own, and in each one, you'll always get action steps and takeaways you can apply right away to your teaching. In addition to the podcast, follow me on Instagram and TikTok for daily videos. You'll see a link on both of my profiles, my Stan Store link. Click it and unlock ways you can get the support you need to be the teacher of your dreams. You'll find links to the podcast, my free ebook, and other resources to help you be the best teacher you can be. You'll also find the link to my signature program, the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint Learning Program, and you can see if you qualify to enroll. So with that, let's get on with today's show. Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I am your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 327. I am recording this on December 16th, 2024, and this will actually go live today, December 16th, 2024. Truth be told, I recorded this last week and something went wrong with the quality of the recording. So I wanted to make sure it was crystal clear for you. So I'm redoing it. It's actually a good thing though, because between when I first recorded it and today, I have launched my brand new membership called the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club. And I was actually going to do a separate episode this week to tell you about it. And now I can wrap it up into this episode. It's an exciting new way that you can be supported as a yoga teacher, a way that you can learn better cueing, how to apply anatomy to your teaching, easy ways to build your sequences, all in the setting of what I'm calling the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club. And I know that you're just going to love hearing about it. So stay tuned until the end of the episode. I'll let you know more details. To start out, I want to let you know what is the promise of today's episode. I always like to start out with that because I want you, if you've pressed play, to know what you're going to get out of this, spending your time with me. At the end of this episode, you will have a plan to glow up as a yoga teacher in 2025. Now, don't think I'm talking about cosmetic appearance. I'm not talking about that. I'll get into why I'm using that phrase glow up in a moment. Think of it more as what are steps that I can take to be the best teacher I can be? And by the best, I mean how you want to be. I'm not talking about some arbitrary framework or bar that you've set in your head or you think is out there set by some yoga alliance organization or otherwise. I'm talking about you, what you envision when you close your eyes and you are imagining yourself teaching classes in the best possible way. What does that look like to you? So at the end of this episode, you'll have a 6-step plan to hit that pinnacle of your vision of what you see in your mind. Now, I want to tell you about this glow up terminology I'm using. Over on TikTok, there are so many things that are posted now about glow up in 2025. Now, if you're listening to this and it's not December 2024, everything you're going to hear, you can still use. This is an evergreen conversation. It's just that if you are listening in December or January, December 2024, January 2025, that's of course when our motivation is the highest for taking on new things and turning over a new leaf, even if it's just lifting the leaf a little bit. I'm not talking about a total revamp. And so over on TikTok, there are so many girls, young women, who are even, it's not even young, just women primarily, who are posting content about how you can glow up in 2025. And of course, they are primarily focusing on inner and outer health. So it's not just cosmetic, it's also about supplements and physical exercise and mindset. It's really a holistic view. And as I was watching a lot of these videos, I thought, oh man, I could do one of those and focus on glowing up as a yoga teacher. And so that's the seed that was planted for the topic of today's conversation. Now, I also want to remind you, if you haven't listened to episode 326, which is the one right before this, my interview with Helene Whitfield, the Chief Visionary Officer of the newly formed GOYA, Global Online Yoga Organization. GOYA is a newly formed organization for yoga teachers that really is presenting an alternative to Yoga Alliance, really highlighting some of what they see as the gaps in Yoga Alliance's offering, really highlighting that yoga teachers are not really receiving much from their membership in Yoga Alliance. And my conversation with Helene was one of the most frank conversations I've had with a teacher colleague about the state of play right now in the yoga industry for yoga teachers, specifically as it relates to Yoga Alliance as an organization and a lot of the details that they put forth about who they are, about what they stand for, and the registration process to become a registered teacher. And we focus on this really to highlight a lot of topics that yoga teachers don't typically talk about, including this idea that if you're not a member of Yoga Alliance, somehow you're going to be ostracized in the yoga community and you're going to get in trouble. And she's talked about teachers being afraid to not be a member of Yoga Alliance, which is definitely something I can see and I can appreciate. However, it's really just pointing out the fact that we need to talk about what is Yoga Alliance and what does it really mean to be a member of Yoga Alliance, and what does it really mean for you as a yoga teacher. So without obviously rehashing everything we discussed, I want to be sure you go back and listen to that episode, because we really talk about things that yoga teachers don't often talk about amongst each other, except for some of what I see, which is complaints against Yoga Alliance. Oh, why do I have to pay an annual fee? Oh, I don't get anything about them. What I wanted to do is have a conversation that really takes it from raising concerns to takes it into really functional conversation to educate you, the yoga teacher, as to what does it really mean and what other options are out there. So take a listen to that episode or watch it here on YouTube if you're watching me live. Keep in mind that now I do record the video for each episode, so you can watch it on my YouTube channel as well as listen to the audio. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm just looking down at my notes if you're watching me on YouTube, is I want to share, I was inspired by a recent coaching call I had with a yoga teacher who's enrolled in my program. And I want to kind of present this idea to you. And it was really spurred by this conversation I had with this teacher. And this idea, and it was partly what I referred to earlier, this idea of what does being the best yoga teacher for you look like in your mind when you envision. Because sometimes what yoga teachers struggle with is this idea that the bar is so high and they are just not reaching that bar. And as a result, and I don't know if this is how you're feeling, I just wanted to put it out there. As a result, this idea of if I don't teach a class and it doesn't meet this imaginary high standard I've set in my mind, that I'm not doing a good job. And a lot of times the reason yoga teachers set the bar really high is because there's a lot of what is picked up out there in the yoga world that leads them to believe a great class has to have all these different elements. And a big piece of that is this idea that we need to be sure as teachers we're meeting everyone's needs, the people that come to our class. And this also sets the bar really high in a yoga teacher's mind, because let's say, for instance, I espouse to this view, and I had in my head the perception that in order for me to teach a class that's really, really good, I need to meet the needs of every single person that comes to the class. So what that looks like is the sequence I have prepped, I may rethink that sequence over and over again in the days leading up to my class, and I may never really feel settled that the sequence is good enough. I may go into the class, and because I'm working with a sequence that I've revamped a number of times, I may be forced to practice with my class. Otherwise, I can't remember what comes next in the sequence. And so even though I might want to walk around the room more and do the walk and talk, I may be forced to practice with them because I've revamped my sequence so much. I'm going in, I'm really feeling nervous, and I'm not able to remember it without notes and by doing it. And so right there, I'm out of sync. My vision of how I want to teach is not a match with how I'm actually teaching. And so the idea here is this is based on this false premise that in this instance, in order for me to teach a class that's really, really good, I have to meet the needs of all these people that are in the class. And this is a pervasive thought that is perpetuated in part by conversations between teachers, and quite frankly, by a lot of the narrative that's out there in the yoga industry, perpetuated by many, many articles and organizations and things like that, where teachers get the impression that your yoga class that you teach has to be a perfect match for everybody in there. Now, of course, we also have languaging that says encourage students to listen to their bodies and encourage students to make it their own. And at the same time, we're giving people the impression that they need to meet everybody's needs. And I'm here to tell you that's an impossible bar to reach. You're going in to teach your class, you really don't know who's going to show up. And even if you did know every single person because they're regulars, you don't know what their body's going to be like on that particular day. So it is an impossibility that you are going to really hit the nail on the head for every single person in your class. This is not a yoga valet scenario. When you're teaching group classes, you're going in and teaching a group experience. This is different from teaching a private. And what it essentially means is that you want to go in there with a plan so that you feel confident and clear on what you're going to offer, and then offer it. Offer it, of course, offering modifications. However, it's different from going in and saying something like, what do you guys want to work on today? That is putting the ball in their court. You have the ball. You have the ball, not them. And I know this might sound a little bossy and a little harsh, and that's not what it's meant, but it is meant to give you your power back. I feel that there's way too much verbiage in the yoga industry that basically strips the power away from the teacher and completely puts it in the hands of the student. Do not get me wrong, the students always have their own power. Students are there of their own free will. Students have agency in your class to do whatever they want. That is just a fact. We don't need to bend over 15 different ways backward to go out of our way to customize everything for everybody. Especially when that means, number one, that we're constantly reworking our sequence before the class out of this concern that, oh, the sequence I have prepared isn't good enough. And number two, that we're going into class and we don't know what comes next in the sequence because we revamped it 10 times. This is what I mean about the bar being too high. This imaginary bar that some yoga teachers, maybe you, have set in your head is way too high. Now, I'm not saying bring the bar lower and have it be a class that lacks quality. What I am saying, though, is once we start to take our power back as yoga teachers from one of we're completely a doormat, we're a complete people pleaser, we're just there to customize everything to every single person, and we're not appreciating that that's impossible. Once we become more empowered, EMPOWERED, now we go in with a plan. Now we are owning our role in this scenario. We are the teacher. This is not a free-for-all. This is not a custom valet experience. This is not a, hey, what do you guys want to work on today? We are showing up with a plan. We are teaching to the plan. And when you start to show up that way, not only will you be more empowered, you will feel more confident. Instead of the tail wagging the dog, now you are becoming the empowered one. And you're going to finally start to step into your designated role as the teacher. So this is essentially the conversation I had with one of the teachers in my program recently, and it was such an important theme that I wanted to share it with you here. So I'd love to hear if any of this is resonating with you. If it is, send me a DM on Instagram and let me know specifically what hit home for you. Now, I want to shift now into our conversation at hand about coming up with, or what you can do to really up level, to really elevate, to really glow up in 2025, or anytime you're listening to this episode as a yoga teacher. So the first thing that I'm going to throw out there on my list is to create a signature sequence. Creating a signature sequence is a sequence you are known for, a sequence you know well. A sequence you get so good at teaching, you can teach it by walking around and teach it without notes. Now, please keep in mind, there is nothing wrong with practicing with your class or teaching with notes. I'm not in charge of yoga, neither are you, neither is the person that trained you, neither is that teacher on Instagram. So anybody who's telling you there's a right way and a wrong way is not telling you the truth. The truth is you can do whatever you want. So I encourage you to ask yourself, what do I want? Do I want to be the kind of teacher who can have the ease of teaching without notes and by walking around? If so, a signature sequence is for you. And if I want to be that kind of teacher, and at the same time, I feel like there are some obstacles to doing it, I owe it to myself to look at those obstacles and to ask myself honestly, truthfully, are those real obstacles, or am I just afraid to walk around the room? And I'm just using these things as excuses. Things that fall into this category are things like, I can't do the walk and talk. My students are visual learners. I can't do the walk and talk. My students need me to practice so they know what comes next. I can't do the walk and talk. My students are older and they have a hard time hearing me. So I need to practice with them so they can see what I'm doing. All of these things are beliefs. They're not true things. They're things we tell ourselves as yoga teachers to justify what we're doing. And because they sound like they're grounded in science or fact, we believe them. And especially because these things have been said by yoga teachers for years and years and years. I've been teaching 22 years and I've heard these things for that long. We just believe that they're true. And because we go to classes, I mean, I don't believe they're true, but you might. And because you might go to classes and see somebody practicing with their class, you might say to yourself, well, it must be okay to practice with my class. This person's doing it. So I urge you to start to become a more, not skeptical, a more inquisitive teacher, and to keep putting yourself first. Because when you put yourself first, you will actually begin to love teaching 100 times more because you'll be showing up the way you want to show up. Even if you go into a class with a bunch of people who are 70, 80, 90 years old and they're wearing hearing aids and they can't hear you well, and you're thinking in your head, oh, I can't possibly walk around because they can't hear me. Start to think about that, because if you walk around instead of practicing with them, they actually can hear you better. If you think your students need you to practice with them, otherwise they won't know what to do, what about just experimenting with a couple of classes where you do the walk and talk? And pretty quickly, what you'll see is that they don't need you to do it. What actually is happening is you need to do it, because that's how you remember what comes next in the sequence. Teachers create a dependency on practicing with their class. And that's oftentimes what is at the heart of the not even the inspiration, the motivation to practice with them. It's not out of a need of the students. It's really the need of the teacher. And this is where I offer you an opportunity to just be honest with yourself about what's really motivating you to practice with your class. Now, instead, imagine you have a signature sequence. You get hours and hours of time back in your life because you no longer need to prep for your classes. And you can teach it so well, you don't even need to think about it. And when you don't consume your brain with all the mechanics of thinking about what comes next in the sequence, guess what? You have so much more brain power to be present, to deal with stuff that's coming up that you didn't expect, to add variations, to add modifications, to really see your students, to rephrase your cues based upon what you're seeing. The world becomes your oyster. You're no longer tied to your mat. You're no longer tied to your notes. And you start to develop a style that you love, that reflects how you want to show up in your classes instead of what everybody else is doing. So that's number one, creating a signature sequence. Number two, in your glow up plan for 2025, start speaking from what you know. When you speak from what you know, your confidence grows. When you use cues where you know the why behind the cue, you can share your cues with greater conviction because there's belief there. You know what you're talking about. Every time you share a cue, behind the cue is the why. And if you don't know the reason why, don't use the cue, because your confidence will go down the tubes when you speak from what you don't know. When you speak from what you don't know, you're a repeater. When you speak from what you know, you are a teacher. And if you're at the stage as a teacher where you're learning anatomy, use action cues. Action cues are powerful, clear, short phrases that speak to exactly what you want your students to do. And I know you know the actions you need your students to take. Step your right foot forward, drop your back heel, reach your arms up, bring your hands to your heart center, arms by your side, sweep up, bring your hands through the heart center, forward fold, lift halfway up, put your hands on the mat, step your feet back, come into plank, right? Action, 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 action. Make no mistake about it, it's still a skill to speak to action. However, it's a much shorter journey to get from where you are now to speaking really clear action cues than the path to faking that you know anatomy and using cues where you don't understand the why behind it. Do the work you need to do to learn the anatomy. I can help you there. And in the meanwhile, good action cues. So this is all around this topic of speaking from what you know. You don't need to impress anybody. You don't need anybody's permission to put the anatomy cues to the side for now. Start owning your role as a teacher. Speak from what you know. Number 3 in your glow up plan, experiment with the walk and talk. Now, I've already talked about this when I went over step 1, so I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. Keep in mind, though, your confidence as a yoga teacher is not going to be found in the hours of training you get in different programs. It's going to be found in your willingness to experiment with different things in your classes so that you can start to find your most authentic way of teaching. So this is a perfect thing that you can experiment with. You can try. And experimenting with something, a different technique in your classes, shows yourself, shows the universe that you're not a rigid thinker, that you are striving to find what works best for you. Now, if you're a closed-minded person, if you're a rigid thinker, then you're not going to experiment with something new, and you're going to suffer the consequences. You're always going to be at battle inside yourself, or you'll just convince yourself that, oh, this is good enough, or, oh, they need this. And again, you do you. There is no right or wrong way to teach. I am simply offering you an opportunity to be just deeply honest with yourself when you hear yourself throwing out these excuses. And I can call them excuses because I've used them and I've called myself out on them. And I've heard many, many excuses from many, many yoga teachers when I do deep work with them inside my program, where one-on-one, we're having these conversations about what inevitably comes to light, which is, hey, I'm kind of afraid to have people looking at me. I don't feel like I'm qualified to be the expert. When I'm walking around the room, I feel like I'm holding myself out as the expert, and I don't think I am. This is the kind of brutal honesty that I invite you to have with yourself so that you can, on the other side of it, start to show up as the true yoga teacher that is inside you. Number 4, stop doing things in your classes, or let me rephrase it, drop doing things in your classes that you think you need to do. And instead, do the things you want to do. Anytime you're doing something as a teacher and the motivation is, well, I need to do this. I need to start them in child's pose. I need to cue to the breath. I need to have a peak pose. Whatever it is, I know you have a list of these things. Ask yourself, says who? Who says I need to have a peak pose? Who says I need to start them in child's pose? Who says I need to cue to the breath? Right? And instead, ask yourself, what do I want to do? This ties nicely to the conversation part earlier where I offered you an opportunity to create a signature sequence. You don't need to do anything. The more you lean into showing up as a teacher the way you want to show up, the more you will love yoga, the easier it will be to teach, the more you will feel like the expert, because you're going to be doing what you want to do. And keep in mind, action cues, signature sequence, it makes the whole process so much easier. Changing cues, using anatomy cues when you don't understand it, makes it much harder. So make a list of the things you're doing that you feel like you need to do, or think about things you're doing that you don't really like to do, and don't do them. You're the one driving the car. Nobody else is. Number 5, finally learn anatomy and give yourself permission to invest in a program. Too many yoga teachers I speak with know that they don't know anatomy, and that may be you. You may know, hey, I didn't learn it in my 200-hour training, but I'm going to try to figure it out on my own. I don't know why people think they can figure out anatomy on their own. You can't. It is too complex. It is too big a subject. And especially when it comes to anatomy for yoga, it's a very niche thing. It'd almost be easier, well, it wouldn't be easier to try to learn anatomy to be a doctor, but at least then you'd know your view would be broad. Here, the view you need into anatomy for yoga teaching is very narrow. And this is one of the biggest problems. When you try to learn it on your own, you don't know what you should be studying and what you shouldn't. because you're not an expert in anatomy like me. So this is why investing in a program and giving yourself permission, like who would say, my car's not working, I'm going to try to figure it out on my own? Nobody. You'd go to a mechanic. My plumbing's not working, I'm going to try to figure it out on my own. Nobody. You'd hire a plumber. My knee is screwed up, I'm going to try to figure it out on my own. You might do it for a week, but eventually you're going to go to the doctor. Why are you thinking you can figure it out on your own by buying books? You can't learn anatomy by reading a book. And if you're taking a course here or there and you're just watching videos, that doesn't work either. What yoga teachers quickly realize when they work with me in my program is that the best way to learn it is step by step, just looking at what you need to know. That's it. And I can speak to that with authority because I've trained so many teachers in my program, and the process is always the same. I've set up a blueprint and it works every single time. And so I'm speaking from the experience of training teachers in this very specific way, this trademarked way that I've created, because I know from a neuroscience standpoint, from a learning standpoint, from a cognitive standpoint, taking a big subject, chunking it out into steps, having the steps go in order, and supplementing the steps with live coaching is the best way to teach you anatomy. So if you know that you need to learn it, give yourself permission to invest in my program, another program. Just give yourself permission to learn from an expert. And that means spend the money. So all the excuses you give yourself, oh, I'm not worth it, oh, I can't spend it, oh, it's holiday time, those are all just excuses, right? You need to know anatomy to be a quality yoga teacher. That is definitely a fact. The last thing, number 6, buy yoga clothes you love. I know this sounds cosmetic. It's not cosmetic though. When you are wearing things you love, your mood shifts. You feel more confident. Take a look at the yoga clothes you're wearing and throw away the old ratty things. And again, give yourself permission to go out and invest in some quality yoga clothes. It's not about brand. It's about what do you feel good in. So that's a short one. I think you get the gist. So those are your 6 steps in your glow up plan for 2025. As we're wrapping up this episode, I want to tell you a couple of final things. I mentioned at the start of the show that I've launched a brand new opportunity for you called the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club. The Yoga Teacher Confidence Club is a place where you can go to receive support through live trainings, live workshops, and live Q&A sessions focused on helping you learn clear ways to share your cues, ways to apply anatomy to your cues, easy ways to build sequences, and ultimately how to feel more confident, which in part comes from learning those techniques I just shared. It also, though, comes from neuroscience-backed tools, habits, and strategies that I will show you that will help you build your confidence. Now, I wanted to do this in a group format where you also have the opportunity to meet other teachers. And I wanted to do it at a price point that is much less than my signature program. And I wanted to do it in a way where you can access workshops and Q&A sessions. So you've got this group experience that you can tap into. You no longer have to be out there on your own using Google to get answers to your questions and feeling isolated because you don't have a mentor. Now you can join the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club and you can get that support to start to shift closer to the direction of your ultimate vision for yourself as a yoga teacher. So I've priced the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club through the month of December at just $27 a month. And when you enroll as a founding member, not only will you get that low rate, the best rate, because the price will go up next year, of just $27 a month, if you enroll in December, you will also get my $400, more than $400 program called the Mindset Method. The mindset method is a training I did earlier this year in 2024 for yoga teachers who wanted to feel more confident. And I loaded it with all sorts of neuroscience-based tools, habits, cueing, sequencing. It's a multi-session training that I did. And you can access that $444 program for free as a bonus when you sign up for the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club. So to enroll, or at least to check it out, because I've made a number of the introductory videos in the portal free for you to view, all you need to do is go to my website, barebonesyoga.com, click on the courses page, and you'll see the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club is there. You can also send me a DM on Instagram at barebonesyoga, and I'll send you the link as well. The next thing I wanted to share with you is in the show notes for this episode, there is a link to a download, 10 steps to increasing your confidence. So take a look at the show notes, get that download. That's a really great place to start. The next thing is I have a brand new video on how to do the walk and talk. We've talked about this a lot in this episode here. If you'd like the step-by-step plan for how to do the walk and talk in your classes, send me a DM on Instagram with the words walk and talk video, and I'll send it to you. And then the last thing I'll say is, since I am on YouTube now, please watch on YouTube as well. That way I can see you, well, virtually, so to speak, and leave a comment. The more you leave a comment, the more YouTube will share the video with other yoga teachers so they can benefit from listening to the episode as well. Thank you so much for being here. Any questions, send me a DM or you can leave them on YouTube. And I will talk to you on the next episode of Conversations for Yoga Teachers. Namaste. Thanks for being here with me today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And hey, one more thing. While I don't know you personally, I know what a yoga teacher looks like who's ready to have a breakthrough to being the kind of yoga teacher who walks around the room, sharing cues you know the reason for, understands anatomy, teaching signature sequences without notes or any need to practice with class, and loves teaching yoga without stress, anxiety, or nervousness. If you are ready to be that yoga teacher, here is your next step. DM me the words podcast offer, and I will give you a special incentive to work with me inside of my signature program just because you are listening to the podcast. DM me on Instagram at Bare Bones Yoga. I can't wait to hear from you.